Sweet Christmas. I hope Jessica Jones never sees this series because it's going to make her feel real bad. I mean, they might as well have called it Luke Cage and His Women. But in Luke Cage and the show itself's defense, all those women are pretty freaking awesome. The ones he makes out with, the ones he makes out with in front of each other, and the ones that he doesn't even make out with. And I think that on a more serious note, considering the lack of roles for black women these days outside of like Shonda Rhimes' work, I mean, things are improving, but this is like a giant leap forward. I mean, talk about doing some heavy lifting. And I think a number of the actresses spotlighted in this show, well known and not, really shined. And I hope they get more work out of this. And we're actually getting another woman too. One of the best things about the series, I think it ended on a really strong note. The tons of hints and Easter eggs that it dropped at the very end of the final episode did a lot to up my excitement about a season 2. And one of those things was when Claire was, ripping off that phone number on the lamppost for martial arts lessons, and they were taught by one Colleen Wing, who of course goes on to team up with Misty Knight in this whole Marvel Knights universe. So that casting announcement should be coming pretty soon. Maybe she'll pop up in the Iron Fist series to get that going. But anyway, speaking of Jessica, I thought it was really weird that she never did show up during this series, especially when that dash cam footage went viral. They said it went viral. Maybe like they were using I don't think something can just go Harlem viral and still be considered going viral. But when they said that dash cam footage was such a big deal, I didn't understand why Jessica Jones, just in Hell's Kitchen, same city, didn't see it and be like, maybe I should go and see if Luke needs some help. And I'm also surprised that, it didn't make the story go national, that they still kept it so insular. I was like, if you're going to make the dash cam footage go viral, you can't have it both ways. You can't say that this is like, a huge thing, globally, because the internet's a global marketplace these days, and not have other characters and other superheroes and other entities weigh in. I thought that was weird. They should have opened up the show at that point. And it speaks to a larger problem that I think the Netflix shows are having. And it's not Luke Cage's fault. It's actually the fourth Marvel Netflix show if you count both seasons of Daredevil. And I think, of course, the first couple of shows took place in Hell's Kitchen. Now we're in Harlem, but it's still, basically, New York City. And I just think there's a sameness that's emerging to them, from the locale to the types of storylines, right? A lot of trips to prison, a lot of crime bosses, local crime bosses, and, the hierarchy of their operations, stitches, people in the community, et cetera, et cetera. And I also think that another problem with the Netflix shows is that they have disjointed seasons. That's something that's starting to emerge. And by that I mean that by the time you get to the end of the show, you're so far from where you started in that season that it seems like two different seasons. And I would say that the split point for Luke Cage was episode 7. Now, I know a lot of you really liked episode 7. I actually disliked episode 7, and I think it really threw the show off the rails. I think it came back as much as it could toward the end, but I think it shifted just to shift. And I think that Diamondback wasn't just Luke Cage's problem, but I think he was this show's problem. I like that actor. We're going to talk about all the characters individually in just a moment. But I felt there were some major problems narratively from that character, and he also ended up sidelining or just replacing, obviously, Cottonmouth, some characters that we were just starting to really like. Now, the best Luke Cage story that I've ever read to date was actually in the most recent comic, Power Man and Iron Fist, issue number 5, where it was, this fight that took place in Harlem and getting different angles from it from a radio talk shows. And it reminded me of it because with Method Man's cameo, which was pretty cool, when they had them talking there on a talk show. And, Trish has a talk show too, Jessica Jones's friend. So it reminded me of that issue, and that issue was really well done. It had a lot of action and had a lot of, the local flavor, which I think is probably going to be the most memorable thing about Luke Cage. But it also had a lot of humor, and I wish this show had more humor, because and maybe it'll be when Iron Fist shows up, that will come around, but I think that could have been something else that differentiated Luke Cage from the other Marvel Netflix shows. And David F. Walker, who writes the current Power Man and Iron Fist comic, he's someone that Marvel TV, Jeff Loeb, should consider bringing onto this show, because I think that it would give this a little bit of a more comedic, lighthearted flavor, which would benefit the show, in my opinion. Now, it's also very political. That's what they have right now. And I like the political aspects of the show quite a bit. But sometimes I felt it was a little bit too on the nose, right? Like when they're like, how often do you, like at the end when they're interviewing this girl whose father was the former sports player. And she's like, mostly heroes wear spandex, but how often do you see a hero who's black in a hoodie? And I'm like, yeah, I got that like really early on in the show. But thanks for like underlining it and circling it and putting a lot of stars around it. I also would have liked the show to try and bring people together as well as point out the current problems that we have in our society. I don't want them to shy away from the difficult conversations that I think the show did a good job of broaching, but I feel they should have tried to move the conversation forward a little bit. And by that, I mean two things, white people and the police. Obviously there are some unfortunate situations where racism is coming into play, etc. It's a complex conversation. But I think that to portray every single white character on the show as racist, not willing to give Luke Cage a shot or a fair chance, I think was really problematic for me. And I wonder how other people watching the show who are also white felt. And this show obviously would like everyone to watch it. It's not made specifically for just one audience. This is a conversation we've been having a lot about how diverse does the show have to be to bring in other viewers. But I just felt bad. It's like, I try to be a good person. I know a lot of other white people who also try to be good people. And I feel like a show like this would make somebody judge me harshly before they even met me just by the color of my skin. And so I thought I was really negative. I didn't like that. I also felt the police, it was really tough. Like it portrayed the police, I felt very poorly. But at the end, when Luke Cage was like hanging out in the police station, it was all good. I was like, oh, awesome. Maybe it was worth it. Maybe that journey was worth it because now Luke Cage is going to get along with the police and we're going to see that it's okay and that everybody just misunderstood each other. Communication is key. But then they arrested him to take him back to Seagate and they were kind of jerks about it. And I was like, man. So I don't think it's helpful. I think it's helpful to point out some of the problems that the police have, but I don't think it's good to just paint them as a broken system that can never be fixed. Right? I had major problems with that. I'd also like to point out that while it was totally inappropriate for that police officer to call Luke Cage son when they pulled him over, right before the dash cam video incident, I felt that they were looking for a suspect. It did turn out to be him. And he was walking in the middle of the street erratically. If he didn't want the police to notice him, he should have walked on the sidewalk. He's walking where cars go. So I didn't think that was like a black and white police bad situation. I thought it was an unfortunate situation where everybody was a little bit at fault. All right, so let's go through the characters. Let's start out with Mike Colter as Luke Cage. What charisma, what star power. I really like Mike Colter. I think he's able to, a lot of you have been talking lately about can a black person seem angry in the public eye without it, making them look bad to other people, right? I think Mike Colter comes across as such a good guy and has such a great vibe that he can get angry. He can talk about these difficult subjects, but he just oozes such, again, like good guy Jimmy Stewartness that, you're like, I want to listen to what Luke Cage has to say. I think this show works a lot because of Mike Colter. Also, just physically, he has a great Luke Cage imposing build. I think I really like him a lot. The only thing that was weird about his character, and I can't decide if this is good or bad or not, is that they created this thing where Luke Cage kind of represents all of black history, right? And just black culture. He's been in the South. He's been in Harlem. He's been in prison. His father was a preacher. His relative was a member of the Red Tails, right? I would prefer that maybe he just be very well knowledged in black culture, like the Crispus Attucks situation. I thought that was great early on in the season. And I just don't think Luke Cage, they should all be, like, he's not like a mythological character. The whole point is he's supposed to be a really realistic, down-to-earth, relatable guy who just happens to have superpowers. So I'm not sure how I feel about it. I like the historical things being brought in, but I don't know if they should be directly a part of Luke Cage's life. Then Simone Missick as Misty Knight. I love this character. It was a little tough when she was being interrogated after choking out Claire. I thought the character became unlikable for a little bit there. But you know what? That just makes her not a Mary Sue. Like Misty was my girl. So I was like, what are you doing to Misty? What's with this character assassination? You've made her really sloppy. And by the end of the show, I think it was proven that Misty, maybe not as good a police detective as we would have liked. However, she's got heart, she's got moxie, and she's a great actress. Simone Missick's a great actress, very likable. And that is a credit to Simone Missick that I was able to still like the character despite all the mistakes she made by the end of the series, including getting someone killed. So I do like Simone Missick, and I do like the character of Misty Knight still. And I think it just creates a complex character. Like, this is a flawed character that's great, and who happens to be a woman. And I see her becoming like a Catwoman figure in the Luke Cage mythos here, where sometimes she messes things up because, again, she doesn't always do a good job. And at the end, when she showed up with her famous fro, I knew that Colleen Wing was coming, and like her arm when Rosario Dawson was like, don't wait too long to get this attended to or you'll lose your arm. It's like, it's fate. There's nothing you can do, Claire. That arm's going to go, and she's going to get a bionic one. I'm thinking courtesy of Hammer Industries. So I thought that was great. So I think that her becoming Misty Knight is something that I'm very much looking forward to. And I like the idea, because, you don't want Misty Knight to just be a female Luke Cage, pretty much, right? So the idea of her being, a real live wire who often makes mistakes keeps that from happening. I would have preferred, though, that not all the women on the show end up being nuts, right? Which is what definitely happened with Alfre Woodard's Mariah Dillard. But I have to say, she was Grey Gardens for a while there in the middle. I was like, what's happening? Why are all the male characters manipulating her? Why is this happening? It's so annoying. But I think that at the very end, in the last episode, when she was in the police station and she was arrested and she was handling the interrogation and then she was talking to Luke Cage before she left, Alfre Woodard and the show found the right exact tone and just the right line to walk for Mariah Dillard, where she has this like public persona that she projects, but she can drop it instantly, and this really crass, street smart, crazed individual comes through. I thought that was great. Like, some of her lines at the end were just absolutely fantastic. When she was yelling at Misty Knight, that like really horribly and crassly, that was great. And when she was like, what file? Bye-bye to Luke Cage, I was like, man, I'm starting to really like Mariah Dillard. So I thought that was good. Although I have to say, I think that they never showed where this was all coming from. Like when they did that flashback sequence with Cottonmouth to when they were kids, you never saw any craziness there with Alfre Woodard's Mariah Dillard. And I thought that that was a disservice to the show and to these characters to not make that seem organic, right? You just had to take the show's word for it. And speaking of that, now I want to move to Mahershala Ali as Cottonmouth, whose work I really enjoyed. And I was sad to see it undermined in episode 7 with the introduction of Diamondback. But also this idea, and I think 7's where it happened. And also this idea that he started out wanting to like study music and go to Juilliard, and he never had any interest in the business. Because throughout the first couple of episodes of this show, Cottonmouth was a real, not big payer of attention to detail, broad strokes kind of guy, really loud. And I didn't see even a glimpse of someone who was at one point a quiet, gifted musician who didn't want to go into the life of crime, right? And so and I guess when he shot his uncle or whatever, that was supposed to be the turning point. But come on, I mean, it was not earned. It was really a weak backstory. And I feel that all the time that was spent on Diamondback could have been better spent fleshing out Mariah and Cottonmouth and or Mariah and Cornell, and their backstory and how they dealt with Mariah Dillard's mother as this Mama Mabel, right? With her as an imposing figure, and how she was trying to change the course of their life and how they both dealt with that. That would have been great, but they didn't do that. They stuck Diamondback in there, and I have major problems with Diamondback, played by Erik LaRay. However, I must first say, I love the Erik actor LaRay, the actor. I think he has a lot of charisma. He really pops on the screen. I just really dislike the character that he was hired to play. Like when he first showed up, I thought he was a hitman when he first showed up and tried to take out Luke Cage with the Judas bullet. The Judas bullet, great name. Loved that when they were talking about why it was named that. I thought that was some great writing. But Then he turned out to be like this, like they clearly were like, this is the big nemesis for Luke Cage. And he was always smiling and very weird and giving these monologues. So I was like, is this like supposed to be the Joker for Luke Cage? But then he turned full Blofeld, where he's like, I'm your half-brother, and I'm the architect of all your pain, Luke Cage. And I was like, man, I just saw this play out, also not so well, in Spectre. So that was frustrating. And then also, the whole problem that he had with his brother, half-brother, I felt was really petty. And like also when they showed them as kids, I was like, you seem kind of okay here as kids. I don't understand, why the beef is so deep. And then also when he was beating up Luke Cage in the street in Harlem on Malcolm X, and he said, your dad was going to leave your mom for mine. And it was just so childish and so flimsy, and like you're like, really, you're holding on to this still? This is absolutely ridiculous. And it's so crazy that it was so immature that the other characters on the sidelines are like, he's talking about your mama, Luke, you got to take him out. And I was like, it does seem like a yo mama kind of situation, which isn't really what great storylines are built around. So I would have taken out Diamondback. I don't think he's necessary. As I've said before, I would have brought Wilson Fisk in here, and I would have focused on Mariah and Cornell. Then Theo Rossi, though, is Shades. This guy really came into his own, and I even started to like seeing him in his shades all the time. I was like, your name and your image is starting to work for me, because he's like this small guy. Recently, I saw him overacting in When the Bow Breaks, but here he really did a good job. He was able to really start to seem very imposing. There's a similar role to this in Daredevil season 1. Wilson Fisk's right-hand man, that actor, I forget his name, I didn't write it down, but he was also in the first season of Billions. But the guy who was Wilson Fisk's right-hand man. You know what a right-hand man is, right? We see him all the time in these kind of shows. But I thought that Shades was very interesting because he clearly seemed to have his own agenda, which he did, and he wasn't a right-hand man. He was like an advisor, and he had like this autonomy, and I thought that was really cool. And I thought he had some funny lines that he was able to pull off, like when he walked into Mariah's brownstone, and he was like, you need better security. He did it like in the Shades voice, but for some reason it worked. And so I liked that character quite a bit. I don't really quite understand the Mariah Shades romance that might be blossoming, except they both seem pretty sexy, I think, with their charisma and their costuming and just the characters that are there. But that is going to be one really weird romance if it continues. But maybe it'll be fun for us, and maybe for them too. But so we'll see. But I was very impressed with the Shades character, and I'm glad he's going to stick around. Then Rosario Dawson as Claire. The right choice for Luke Cage. I think that all of his other choices, including Jessica Jones, I'm sorry to say, although I think, well, in the comics he ultimately ends up with her, but let's see if that's the case. But I think that everybody else is a little bit too crazy for Luke Cage. I think at the end of the day, Luke Cage is a regular guy who just wants to chill after, just like he did in episode 13 after his hijinks, and that, Claire is someone you can totally chill with. But she still calls him on his stuff, so she's just the right balance. So I thought they actually made I wasn't seeing it until the end, but at the end I did see it. You guys do make a cute couple, although she has got to stop sleeping with her patients, because first Matt Murdock, I don't know if they slept together, but they definitely made out, and now, of course, Luke Cage. But let's focus on the most important thing. She's the night nurse. Oh, I'm so happy. Suck it, Rachel McAdams. I think that this is a great role for Rosario Dawson. I think it's perfect for the Claire Temple character. I think she proves herself again and again with her ability to not only help these, her willingness to help them, but her ability to think outside the box, as Dr. Bernstein complimented her on, right? I mean, when a mad scientist gives you mad props, you're in the right business. So I'm very excited for that development, and I'm curious if she'll get her own series. We know she won't, but she's probably going to end up showing up everywhere. So I think she's just great. Then I wanted to give some shout outs to some standouts during the first season. So Frankie Faison as Pop, literally gone too soon, like from the show. By the very end of the season, they were like, oh yeah, remember Pop? And I was like, vaguely, he was such a great character and he was so instrumental in Luke Cage's life. but you guys, like, the show just kind of like forgot about him at the very end. And so I think he could have stuck around for a couple more episodes for sure. Then I also really liked Karen Pittman as Misty's new boss, Priscilla Ridley. I thought she had such a cool look. Like, she was believable as, like, the head of the department, right? But she still looked like really, like, just as well manicured. I feel bad focusing on people's looks, but, you know, a lot of really pretty actresses on this show, which I thought was great. But they were none of them were objects, which I thought that's very unusual. So all these really pretty women, but who were all really intelligent and interesting and complex and dynamic. And I think the Karen Pittman definitely fit that. Also, Deborah Arendt is Candace. I thought she was great. And she had a really cool look, a really striking look. I hope she gets more work as well. And I have to give a shout out to Jeremiah Richard Kraft as Dave, who not only sold those, the footage of superhero fights, but his friend had an amazing camera. I was like, where'd you get that, right? You guys, I'm not going to look into it, but that does not look... I mean, those are expensive. The cameras they were using was like a couple of grand. Although maybe he sells a lot of superhero footage. And then, of course, I have to give a special shout out to the episode forecast, who made that episode just so special. And I think probably still my favorite episode of the series. I thought the Parissa Fitz-Henley as Reva Connors, you know, she was in Jessica Jones, but just really getting the crap beat out of her by Jessica. Here, great character. You know, I'm really curious to see what's going on there. I'm still hoping she's a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, but there's certainly some mystery left there. Then also Craig Mums Grant as Squabbles, and Chance Kelly. Everybody loves a good villain, and I thought that Rackham, the guard, was a great villain. So I think that really spectacular work there all around. So I think that Luke Cage has a lot of good stuff going for it. I think that there are some mistakes, but I think they're definitely breaking new ground here, especially in this kind of a show which is so politically conscious, and also they're stuck working in the framework of the Marvel Netflix shows. But I'm very excited for season 2, and because as I said, they did a really good job getting people excited for that. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on Luke Cage season 1? Be sure to write them down below, as well as like who your favorite characters were and who you could have lived without. Diamondback. All right, you can check out some more coverage right now.